Thanks so much for being here.
It's my pleasure.
So let's just get right into it. We've asked this question to everybody. You're not going to escape this one either. Talk about the government shutdown. Where are we? Where are we going?
Oh boy, you know, I would have to say that I was a lot more optimistic that it would be over very quickly about a week and a half ago. But now it's sounding like we might go all the way to the debt ceiling, which I hope we don't. But you know, it's all about making sure that we are talking to each other. I actually voted against my own party on the medical devices tax. I voted for the repeal. So you know, I think that there are ways to work together. But you know, first we need to just get a clean budget passed so that we can get the government open again.
Do you think there are the votes in the House for that?
I do.
So talk about then what this entire thing means for the Department of Defense and for the other agencies and personnel who are working on the cyber mission right now. Is it as dire as we've been told all day today?
I really think it is. I believe that something like 72% of the cyber community in defense and in intelligence are on furlough right now. So that's data that's not being analyzed. That's data that's not being scrubbed. And we could be missing, you know, attacks. I mean, if somebody wanted to attack us, this would be a great time to launch a cyber attack against the United States, because the folks who would be detecting the attacks and also defending against those attacks are on furlough and not allowed to even do their jobs.
Sure, and this is on top of long-standing concerns about sequestration and other sorts of budget cuts at the Pentagon and other federal agencies. Talk a little bit about what that's done to the Pentagon and its mission.
You know, it's just the whole uncertainty. It's the cutbacks, it's the folks who are on furlough, it's the uncertainty of what the next mission is going to be, how folks are going to fit into it. It's really hurt morale. I think that, you know, sequestration is very insidious, right? If you're from a district like mine where we don't have a lot of defense, large defense, you know, military bases, you don't see it right away, but it's showing up in education programs, it's showing up in social services, and I think that's what's happening also just across the intelligence community, in that those folks just are not sitting at their desks doing their jobs.
Sure, absolutely. So what we had discussed in the previous two panels with Congressman Thornberry, Congressman Schiff, is whether the Pentagon and other parts of the federal government are really ready for the cybersecurity battlefield. Some of these new threats coming from places like China and Iran. Talk to us a little bit about readiness, even outside the concerns of the budget and sequestration.
Sure. So I think that they are improving, but I don't think we're ready. I really see cyber as a new realm of military operations. So we started off, if you go back in history, indulge me a little bit. You look at what happens with, you know, the Roman Empire and it was all about the ground battle. It was about controlling territory. And then we moved on to the next realm of operation, which is sea power. And so you had the rise of the British Empire and the domination of the sea power. But the sea power was not just about battles on the oceans. It was about also delivering logistics. It was also about delivering those ground troops into the territory to control the ground. Then when you had, with in World War II in Vietnam, you saw the rise of air power. And that air power was critically important in logistics, in delivering the troops, but also in making sure that we dominated the skies as well. And I really see cyber as that next realm of military operations, in that it has to be there in all the other, in air, land, you know, the air-land battle and on the seas as well. But it has its own realm of operations. Just like we had to dominate the skies in terms of aviation power, and we need to dominate the oceans with naval power, we had to do the same in cyber. And if you look at where our troops who are fighting the cyber war are, they're great folks, but they don't start out as cyber warriors. They start out as infantrymen or aviation or whatever else it is. And at some point, somebody looks at them and goes, you know, a great career field for you to switch over where you might get promoted is cyber. Why don't you go there? But if you look at the Chinese military, the people fighting their cyber war, their cyber warriors are recruited right out of college. They probably have 1 or 2 PhDs. This is all that they do. And so our folks are really playing catch up, and we have to build that infrastructure within our military, but also within our educational system, so that we can actually produce the cyber warriors, just like we have the Navy SEALs and we have the Green Berets, right? They are the absolute best at what they do. We don't quite have that yet in cyber, because that's not what those folks, our cyber warriors, do 100% of the time, and they didn't start out their career becoming, you know, the Green Berets of the cyber war.
Sure. How do we fix that, though? Where's the solution start? I mean, everybody will probably agree that education has to improve, but how do you fix that problem in a specific, tailored, effective way?
Well, I think there's several things. If you're looking at in terms of recruiting the cyber warriors, we actually have to recruit people from the time that they join the military, that this is the career field they want to get into. This is their primary thing. This is all they do. The guys who become Green Berets, the guys who become, aviators, who become Navy SEALs, this is what they go for, right? This is the premier elite thing that they do. I just don't think that we're quite there yet for the cyber warriors. These are folks who have secondary skills. My husband does enterprise network infrastructure and cybersecurity for the National Guard. But he was an air defense artilleryman to start off with, right? He was a Stinger missile platoon leader, but he, in a civilian world, did this. And so now he's moved into this new field. But it's not what he's done for his entire career. And we need to invest in that in the military. I also think at the national level, we need an encompassing cyber policy, something that sort of governs both our national security and the cyber war itself, but also protects individual rights and citizens' privacy and all of that. And we don't have anything that's overarching in that way.
Sure, and we're going to talk about reform in a minute, but to your point about recruiting these new cyber warriors, I mean, General Keith Alexander, who's going to be here later, would say the same exact thing. He went to Capitol Hill. He's asked for thousands of new cyber warriors, the goal being to staff up these offensive and defensive teams. But repeatedly what he's told from members of the Hill in these budget documents that maybe aren't necessarily well publicized is that there's an issue with finding the talent and paying for it. What do you think?
Well, there is, but I also think, look, our military men and women work for relatively little pay compared to the outside world, and to get the cyber warriors, I don't think that the dollar amounts is always the thing. You couldn't pay somebody in the civilian world to do what a Green Beret does. They do it out of love and dedication to their nation and the pride of what they do. So that's part of that recruiting as well. And I think that there's just a lack of understanding of cyber as a new realm of military operations.
Sure.
And I'm sort of having those conversations on armed services with my colleagues that, look, this is a whole new realm. This is a new battlefield that we have to fight on.
Sure, so that $4.7 billion that the president had requested for the next fiscal year for Pentagon cybersecurity spending, huge boost. You would support that kind of expansion?
I would. I would have to take a look at exactly
Sure.
what it would encompass. I'm not going to sign a blank check either. So there are things that the military does better now, but there are other things where partnership with civilian organizations would be good. We have a lot of folks who have far more experience at protecting financial security networks in the civilian world, providers, who are much better at it than the U.S. military is. So we need to take a look at those civilian providers of just broadband access and internet access and what they have in place. So let's make sure that we don't try to create something in the military that already exists and is functioning in the civilian world.
Sure. Of course, that brings up the question of the insider threat, obviously. You want to bring more people into the federal government. You want to hire more contractors. You increase the number of people who have access to this information. And there are plenty of people who would draw a straight line, honestly, between the Edward Snowden revelations and the expanding roles of federal contractors and folks who have access to this material, which leads me to a question that was sent to us from Twitter. How do you fix this problem? How do you attract all of these workers while improving the security clearance process, improving the filters in place to make sure you're getting the right people?
Well, I think that it's a balance. I don't think that you want just to open the doors and just have all these civilian contractors come in. I think one of the problems that we have in the military now is the privatization of military operations. Sometimes it's good if you have a civilian company run the housing on a military base, but sometimes it's bad. You don't need Blackwater or Z or whatever that company is called now, providing security for our bases when we have U.S. troops who can do that. So it's that balance of how you do it. One of the things I'm really interested in is the role of veterans in the cyber world and in these areas. I've actually been looking at U.S. ports. Mm-hmm. So a lot of our veterans who are applying to go work come into the civilian world with secret clearances and sometimes top secret clearances. But when they go to the Department of Homeland Security to apply for a job there, that DoD clearance is not recognized. So they can't even go get a job as a forklift driver on a U.S. port, at a U.S. port with a secret clearance from the DoD. They have to wait to get a Homeland Security clearance. So some of this is also just leveraging the talent that we have, the skills, the security that we have, and the training. These men and women who come out of the military have the security training. They understand information operations. They understand, every year you get briefings on the importance of information security. In fact, I just completed my module in the National Guard last month. So let's leverage the talent that we have and make sure that as we bring in the civilian workforce that they get that same type of training.
Sure, there are questions about personnel, then there's obviously policy. Talk a little bit overall about how you feel of the president's strategy on cybersecurity. Lots of questions about the moving pieces, but how would you grade how the White House has done on addressing these threats?
Well, I think they're better than anyone else, but I think there's room for improvement.
Sure. What needs to be fixed?
Well, one of the things that I was glad that had been fixed was, and I think maybe this was more of a congressional, I voted for CISPA.
Sure.
I voted for CISPA, but I voted for CISPA after the amendment was put into place to place overall responsibility under Homeland Security and not the NSA, because I do not want the military, I do not want a general in charge of a program that will deal with privacy and information and PII for civilian. We need to have, the military should always be subservient to the civilian. And so some of those things we need to look at. I don't think that, again, we have an overarching federal standard for cyber, and that's something we need to move towards. And I think that White House could do, even better job of getting that out there. Because, as I said, I talked about ports. The U.S. Coast Guard does not have oversight of the cybersecurity in our port system. Yet if you go to any port in the U.S., you have actually people who rent space, right? People who occupy space, different companies, and their network to govern their business's operations is tied into that port's network. So they're tied into the logistics system, the reporting of when the ships come in, when do the trucks have to show up to move the products off of the containers, off of the ships onto the trucks. There's no security audit being done on those people who are the folks who live and work in on that port system. Coast Guard should have the authority to do that, and they don't.
Sure, absolutely. So you mentioned CISPA. CISPA obviously was written and amended and passed by the House long before the Snowden debacle had come to light. Would you have still voted for that legislation, given all that we know now? And do you think that there's going to be a push on Capitol Hill for more strict limits on information sharing with cybersecurity?
After all of the briefings that I went to, and I went to, when I started, I was not very supportive of CISPA, but I went to multiple briefings. I talked to a lot of folks, both in and out of government. For me, the key thing was and still is that oversight of the whole project is under a civilian authority, because I think that makes them much more accountable and much more open and much more cognizant of PII and people's privacy. So I would, under the circumstances, I would vote for it again.
Sure. One of the questions asked over Twitter talks about economic security, trade secret theft issues resulting from cyber spies who are stealing intellectual property. Your thoughts on ways to combat that, what Congress and the administration needs to do to stop this problem?
Well, I think that's where we need to definitely do what CISPA was intending to do, which is a closer communications between our businesses as well as our government functions. We have to make it a safe thing for businesses, for these large corporations, the Lockheed Martins, to report that, hey, we have been infiltrated, and the information on our F-35 has actually been stolen and been downloaded. So that communication is critical, but it has to be done in such a way that there are safeguards for the security of that information, that we're not violating people's individual rights, but at the same time that we're helping our businesses. And it can't just all be government, and it can't just all be corporate.
Sure. Congresswoman, last question. We've heard plenty of issues here outside the realm of cybersecurity today, Shutdown obviously being the biggest of them. What's your prognosis for whether cybersecurity legislation can even advance before the end of the year? We're very much getting the impression that there are a lot of roadblocks that make the end of 2013 a hard deadline. What do you think?
I think it's very wishful thinking if we think we're going to get there. I mean, we're still waiting for a vote. We've not been allowed to vote on the president's jobs bill. We've not been allowed to vote on immigration reform. We're not being allowed to vote on a clean budget to get government open again. So there's a lot of things in line before the end of the year, and we don't. We have less than 3 months left.
Great. Well, Congresswoman, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Really appreciate the time.
Thank you.